All right, I've got 3 o'clock, so why don't we think about getting going here? Today is Wednesday, December 7th. It's about 3:01 p.m. 2022 also, and this is the December meeting of the Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District Board. That's our call to order. At this time, I thought we might take a moment, stand and remember all the 2,400 Americans who lost their lives at Pearl Harbor in 1941. So if you would, stand. We'll take a moment.
A day that will live in infamy.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for doing it. Good
At this time, I'll ask the clerk to call the board roll, please.
Barnes.
Here.
Chaplin. Delgado.
Here.
Fasella.
Present.
Hannon.
Here.
Nudo.
Here.
Dial.
Here.
Quorum is present.
Thank you. Our next item is the approval of our agenda for today's meeting. I'll ask for a motion second.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve our agenda for today's meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. We'll also note that Board Member Chaplin is in attendance this time. Our next item is our public hearing on the General Tax Levy Ordinance for 2022. The primary purpose of this public hearing is to provide an opportunity for public input on the General Tax Levy Ordinance of the Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District for revenue year 2022 to be paid in calendar year 2023. Notice of the proposed tax increase for the Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District appeared as a black bordered notice in the News Gazette on November 25th, 2022, and the proposed tax levy was posted on the district's website, www.mtd.org, under the financial documents for public review on November 18th, 2022. Any comments from the public on the tax levy ordinance? Yes, sir. Please stand and give us your name and address, and you're limited to 5 minutes on your comments.
I'm Harold Diamond, and I live in Urbana at Clark Lindsay Village. And in the past, I was a big rider of the MTD when I was a faculty member at the university.
Could you speak up?
Yeah, I'll take my mask off. Yep. So once again, I'm Harold Diamond. I live in Urbana at Clark Lindsay Village, and I've been a big rider of MTD. I had seen the notice, and that's what brought me here today. I would like to say that on the one hand, I'm sympathetic with the effort to get the Carl facilities to pay their share of taxes to the community for reasons which I'm sure you people understand. However, the scheme that's used whereby you ask for an amount to operate the MTD for the coming year and then surcharge it with an extra levy in case you succeed in your suit with the MTD, so with the Carl facility. This strikes me as both bad public relations and basically morally wrong. If you succeed in your suit of getting tax money from the Carl facility, that money should be used for the operation of MTD for the benefit of the citizens and not pumping extra money into the system. Our experience, and many of us have seen in the past, the MTD does not have a great reputation with the community for its projects which it has undertaken when it had extra money or thought it had extra money. These include things like the proposal to have a skating rink or to have a tram system, which I think would have cost $186 million. Okay, so these kind of things have not endured the MTD with the public, and it's very unfortunate because basically you're doing stuff which the public approves of, but when you engage in other things outside the transportation area, that does not reflect well on MTD. And if you were to get extra money from the Carl suit and then start putting it to such uses, this would not be well received by anybody. So I'm asking in the future that you ask for the amount of money that you're going to need, and you, if it's to include money from Carl or whatever, it's fine, but not to be asking for extra money, and then the community is left to wonder what kind of projects MTD has in mind. Okay, thank you for this.
Thank you for your comments. We appreciate it. Any additional public input on the General Tax Levy Ordinance? Seeing none, at this time I will be closing the public hearing. If there are no more comments, I declare this public hearing on the MTD's General Tax Levy Ordinance for 2022 to be closed. Our next item on our agenda is our audience participation. Is there anyone additionally in the audience that wishes to comment on any MTD item? Seeing none, we will move on to the approval of minutes from our board meeting, the open session, October 26, 2022. I'll ask for a motion in a second after you review those.
I would move that we approve the minutes as presented in our board packet from the October 26th meeting.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the board meeting minutes from the open session, October 26, 2022. I will not be voting on this as I was not in attendance. All in favor? Aye. Those opposed? That motion carries. Communications, Carl.
I don't have any.
Anything from any of the board members? Communications you've received? All right. We'll move right into the managing director's report then. Carl?
All right, thank you. Let me apologize in advance. I'm getting over a cold and I have a kind of a hanger-on cough, but I'm COVID negative and it was just a cold, so bear with me. All right, this report is highlighting the stats for October. And in October of 2022, there were 949,844 rides. This is up 15% from October of 2021. So we're approaching that million mark again in our ridership, and so that is a continuing strong recovery from the the pandemic level of ridership that we were experiencing in 20 and 21. So that's good. It's up 15.42% from last year. Moving on to year-to-date ridership, that's starting to tell a different tale, or an interesting tale, I guess. The ridership so far year-to-date is 2.8 million, and that is over this point in time last year of 2.5 million. Interestingly, we have now exceeded our 5-year average, because, of course, the 5-year average includes 2 years of pandemic. And so, for the next 4 years or so, we're still going to have really goofy statistics relative to multi-year averages. So that just will look weird for a period of time. And then the next slide, you can see that this just tells a multi-year tale. That pre-pandemic we were at 1.3 million. We are approaching 1 million, but that's still down 29% from that pre-pandemic level. But that fluctuates from year to year. Just as a reminder, October is always our highest ridership level. So that 2019 level of 1.3 was, the high point for 2019. So. All right, moving on to operating revenue. The operating revenue is 5.1% above October of 2021, and the year-to-date operating revenue is 6.6% above FY 2022. The operating expenses were 10.3% above October of 2021. At this point, we were mostly similar service levels, but of course, fuel costs are about, depending on the week, 3 or 4 times what they were a year ago. And so we have really volatile fuel expenses right now, and that makes up a big chunk of that difference. And of course, we've had wage increases, insurance costs, and that kind of thing. The year-to-date operating expenses are a little more moderate at 6.7% above what they were last year. The operating revenue, the revenue versus budget, the year-to-date operating revenues are $419,000 above budget, and the operating expenses were $2.1 million below budget. That primarily, just as a reminder, that primarily is because we budgeted for 100% of service level, and we're operating at 80% of our service level. And with that, I will take any questions that you have through page 34.
Questions for Carl on his report or anything moving forward there? Seeing and hearing none, we will move directly into the discussion portion, and we're going to move into our discussion about commercial real estate representation. I'm going to allow Board Member Nudo to direct us on this portion of the conversation. Al?
My comments will be brief because I would like to have some discussion off the comments and have some discussion after I've spoken some of the things that I think are pertinent. A commercial realtor, just to give a quick definition, I'm sure all of you know, it's a realtor who specializes in the sale of commercial or leasing commercial properties. And it's a valuable asset to any business that utilizes the service. They have knowledge of the market. They know about pricing of product, primarily land and buildings, and they know the availability. They have sophisticated software systems that offer an entity like ourselves to look at multiple properties when we're looking at opportunities to purchase or lease land. It's a lot harder to go out and do it yourself. It's a lot harder if you've ever done it buying a house. You know exactly what it's like to try and drive neighborhoods and take a look at what's available and what's not available. So it's an asset just like any other thing that we have to utilize, and I think it's something that we ought to consider very strongly. They also have expertise with buyers and sellers, and that is a real valuable commodity as well. They know in the marketplace of people who are in the market to sell properties, lease properties, through word of mouth, and again through the sophisticated software system. One other area of expertise that I think is very important for a realtor to provide to us is the ability to negotiate. They are in this every day. They negotiate properties, leasing, working with the attorneys to develop clauses that are specific to the property. And because every property has a different nuance to it, and every customer has a different nuance to it, they have different needs, and those clauses in the lease are very critical for ongoing relationships in the leasing market, and certainly when you're buying a property, to know exactly what you're buying and what you're paying for it. So who uses these kinds of services in a commercial realtor? And I'm looking at apples to apples comparisons. Carl has a gentleman by the name of Marty Smith. Marty was one of the founders of Ramshaw Smith. He was a realtor before he became an in-house realtor for Carl. When we were dealing with a property in downtown Urbana, we dealt with Jill Guth, who was representing Busey Bank. So banks use it. I had an occasion to talk to city planner at the city of Champaign, and city of Champaign uses realtors on an occasional basis or also for advisory basis. And what was recommended to me by the individual I spoke with in city planning was that really there's two ways to compensate a realtor, a commercial realtor. One is a commissionable event. So in the event where we are purchasing a property, that commission will suffice in paying the person what their expertise provides. In an advisory capacity, City of Champaign city planner recommended that we put out, a timeline to use those services, be it a year or whatever, and come up with a budget so you don't have to go to the board all the time. You may not use up the entire amount that is, recommended for that year, but you do have an ongoing relationship. So the bottom line is, we could do this piecemeal. We could get a realtor to help us in a given incident or need specific, but you don't develop relationships that way. You don't develop what the needs are if they are listening to what you need every day and every opportunity that we have. And I'm proposing that we vote on, not today, we'll need to have further discussion, and we need to have, I think, a committee from the right committee layout that we have right now for the board members that would participate in this, and the administration putting together our request for proposal so that we could vote on something that has the two ways of compensating and the ways that we would utilize the services. And I would just like to see a lot of discussion on this and get your opinions on this. I don't have all the answers, but I think certainly our MTD attorney and others would have ideas as to how we would make this work.
I'm sure too, these people understand.
Bruce, can you turn your microphone on?
That these people don't write contracts, but they understand them. And we're in the constant throes in the MTD of using expertise that we can't do in-house. Engineers, lawyers, communication specialists. Here's another one.
Well, and to build on that, as a commercial broker, a lot of what I do in these transactions is coordinating that expertise. So working with a client on a project in Decatur, we're building a power plant next to ADM and Caterpillar, and he's used to greenfield developments where you're buying a farm field, and this is a former power plant. So coordinating, between the surveyor and the seller and the attorney, and we've got a very competent real estate attorney, but there's things you don't think about where you're saying, hey, it looks like on the title history here that there's steam tunnels. Okay, so we need to make sure we have an ALTA item on the survey, basically on the list of things we're asking our surveyor to do. We need to order and coordinate a private utility locate, figure out the extent and connection of these steam tunnels, and then coordinate that with our engineering team. There's, sometimes with big developments, there's a lot of moving parts, and your broker can be the person who catches things like that. So we're going to order a survey, and we need to have the title work include the buried utilities. We need to know what those are so the surveyor can map them out. They get on the survey, and then it ends up on the title work. And to get all those done smoothly, you really need somebody who's got the commercial expertise to line it out. It wasn't enough just having, a surveyor and a attorney, but you need somebody on the ground that can look at it and say, hey, this is how we need to approach this. And then again, I think something that Alan touched on was the gossip side of it. I hate to put it that way, but that's a lot of what commercial brokers do. And whether it's from a negotiation perspective where exactly what this person's background is that you're dealing with, and can tease out from that what level of a motivation he or she may have to sell or buy, and what his real position and resources, could be. That can be extremely helpful. And then the other side of it is knowing, what maybe isn't on the market but might be on the market soon, and jumping in there. We're looking at a property potentially that, a broker mentioned to me in passing, well, I listed it because I know MTD is going to buy it, and they listed it for 3 times what it sold for 2 years ago. If we had had a realtor, we could have gotten in front of that train when he was trying to sell, somebody who understood what we might be looking for in the future. And that's a lot of what Marty Smith, and then John Rector's wife, I believe, is working for Carl now as well. That's a lot of what they do, is they're just looking for stuff that, hey, if, before this hits the market, we need to intercept this person before they list it and get Carl in there, because Carl's got all these long-term plans, and they're sort of plotting that out, plans for housing development, plans for expanding the hospital and parking and everything else. So I do think it would be nice to have somebody like that on our side, and I don't think that it's actually going to cost us anything to do it. I think it'll be a net savings. Just because, a small percentage of commission wouldn't be a substantial amount even if we had to pay it, and I think there's very, very real savings to be realized there. So that's my perspective anyway.
Additional comment from the board or questions? Go ahead, Margaret.
Actually, I have several concerns about this. And I think part of it could have been taken care of if I'd had sort of a real definite proposal specifically saying exactly what this is going to do. How are we going to select this person, or company? How are we going to pay them? How are we going to keep confidential when they've got other clients that might be selling to us who was also their client? I'm also extremely concerned that we will not be able to find someone or some firm who is really familiar with federal and state governmental procurement and purchasing regulations. We found that before with members that we've had on the board. Back in the day, I can't remember exactly when, but and I can't remember the property, but we had 2 appraisals on the property that were, I don't know, $1.5 million apart or something like that. And one of the board members asked, well, what if somebody was willing to sell us the property for less than the lower appraisal? Well, we can't do that. We can't buy below the lower appraisal. We have to pay between the 2 of them. And I don't know, there would be a long learning curve, it seems to me, to have somebody come in and try to familiarize themselves, whereas our attorneys, our board members, they know the rules already. I don't know, I just worry about not finding somebody that really is familiar with the government procurement and purchasing regulations.
That same thing was true of our attorney. Same thing was true of our attorney. What attorney that you would find in town here knows enough about federal and state contract laws? Hardly any. They have to learn.
You should learn that in school.
No.
Oh, not?
No. If I could address a few items on that, Brad.
They
They're good
hardly
questions.
learn it in law school here.
Yeah, they're good questions. And that's the purpose of today. As you well know, I proposed this a long time ago, and it's been a back burner situation for a while, and our first priority was to find a firm, attorney's firm that would represent us in all areas of expertise, and we believe we've done that. So now we're turning to a realtor, commercial realtor. And what I'm proposing, and could not do that today because we really need to have staff and whatever members of a committee from the board craft this. And I fully expect that we will have a combination of compensation through commissions and some retainer fee that would compensate. And I agree with Phil, it's going to be a very inexpensive addition to our expertise. As far as realtors' confidentiality, having been a member of the national and Illinois state real estate boards, we have a code of ethics that is very strong and a strong disciplinary of the kinds of things that you're talking about. If they're reported, can result in disciplinary action, fines, revocation of their license. It's very common on kinds of deals that we're talking about here that the attorney's going to draw up a confidentiality statement for all parties to sign. So again, under penalty of whatever is determined, it's pretty disciplined on that basis. And again, your point about learning the information about governmental regulations, commercial realtors are very, very skilled in developing those needs of what they need to do to get a sale. There's a motivation there, and there's a motivation to get it correct. And it would be on our responsibility to give them that background, just as it would be for any, in the case of what Phil was describing, indicator. You need to have background, and you need to know exactly what you're looking to do. And then once that's done, if we have a regular appointed realtor, they'll learn it as they go, and it'll be an ongoing education, but it will benefit us. This is, I don't want to see a hit and miss one at a time, get a new realtor. I'd like to have somebody that we can count on attending meetings and attending things that would benefit everybody. Thank you.
Additional board comment. Margaret.
Two things. First of all, can you give me sort of a ballpark figure of what a commission might amount to for a realtor? And secondly, can you give us perhaps an example of how we might have been harmed or been foolish by not having one?
To your first question, there is no set commission. Again, the Code of Ethics would prohibit that. And so it's all negotiable. And so that would be a matter between buyer and seller as a part of the negotiations. As far as what the cost would be and who would incur it, I don't know, you know better than I do, but I would say ballparkish, 95% of the transactions are paid for commissionable by the seller. So if we were the buyer, and in most cases we are going to be the buyer, we would have no cost.
A second question?
Go ahead, Isaac. Oh.
About how we may have been harmed by not having one? Or how you could imagine we could be harmed if by not having one?
We had a recent transaction that went back several years ago that this board discussed openly, of paying a higher amount because we put an improvement on the property. But that's not, I mean, that's not what I think we are trying to do here. Today, we're going to hear from Carl the yards update, okay? I would love to have the realtor and the attorney sitting side by side with Carl during the negotiations. Not after, not to take a look at how it could have gone or what we should do to go back and try and unwind it. Right now, we should have somebody there with him. I'm not saying anything bad about Carl. I'm saying he has expertise in transportation. We hire engineers and technicians. We're having a couple of votes today on communications and other things that we need that are from consultants. And this is no different. This is absolutely no different. And I look at it a little differently on what we ended up paying for that property that I just discussed and what we might end up with at the yards. We could pay top dollar because, you know, the government pays anywhere from 65 to 100% of the thing. It's no skin off our nose a lot of times. And so we have a tendency to pay top dollar. But I would like to know from a realtor what are like-kind properties that have market value of similar nature. I would like to protect the taxpayers' money and not pay top dollar if we don't have to. If information comes from a realtor about, you know, urgency to sell, that's a plus to us. Now, I know we have to go through an appraisal thing, but that's something on the learning curve. That's something on the learning curve that we have to work with. I'm sure if every MTD in this country has it, we've got somebody to talk to about how it's done. So I see no downside, Margaret. I honestly don't. I just think it's another arrow in our quiver that would get us to where we want to be with more expertise.
And there are aspects to things in a complicated project like the yards that wouldn't be necessarily controlled by appraisal, because we're not, in that case, acquiring property, we're negotiating a development agreement. So figuring out, really what, what percentage of ongoing revenues from an apartment development should we be asking for? Who can work out those numbers? And I felt like, the last time we went over that sort of with the core guys, it didn't feel like they came to us with a realistic idea of what those incomes even would be, let alone if anybody broke out a cap rate and figured out, are we getting a fair return for putting this shell together or not? I mean, yes, it worked out to be a good deal because it was essentially a way to get back free money from the government, but it'd be nice if we were getting, potentially more. And we don't know what we left on the table because there was really no analysis of what the developer was going to be making off of this. They're not going to necessarily give that to us. We've got to sit down and break, hey, this is their construction cost, this is what their return is going to look like. So we should ask for this chunk of the pie. And without that perspective from somebody who's done that sort of, basically high-rise development, we don't really know what we're negotiating with. And that's tough. I don't want to be in a situation where I feel like I'm voting on something that we don't really know what the other side's getting out of it,
Additional board comment on this item before I ask for Carl.
Yeah, I do have one comment and question.
Hey, Tomas.
I understand the utility of bringing in consultation when it's sort of on a needs basis, but it seems like the distinction is that you all are wanting to form a relationship with a broker, allowing them the opportunity to kind of learn the nuances of property acquisition using federal dollars. Do you think that the district has a frequency of property acquisition that would allow that kind of learning curve to occur?
Not the only agency in town that does things with federal dollars. I mean, the University of Illinois also is, for certain programs subject to similar rules. And, there's other agencies like school districts and things that have complicated procurement rules. So, and a lot of commercial realtors are covering, a regional area, right? I mean, I do stuff within a few hours drive. So, and I'm sure other brokers are probably covering much larger areas than I am. So yeah, I think this would definitely be worth somebody's while. I think we could definitely, not keep somebody busy full time, but this would be a client, MTD would be a client that it would be worth excluding clients who might sell to MTD to avoid a conflict. I think it would be worth taking us on. I think we'll have several interested parties if we put out a request for qualifications or something like that.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be interest, but do you think that there is a projected frequency of these sorts of transactions to occur to justify bringing in someone?
We could advertise.
No, he's asking, do you think we're going to be purchasing enough property to make it worth someone's while, basically?
Yeah, because I've been on...
Advertise for people.
Yeah, that's not the issue. It's the issue, I think, that Tomas is asking about is, are we going to be doing enough business?
I'm talking about trying to find somebody that could do this.
Yeah, that's not Tomas's point.
Request for bids.
If I understand your question, Tomas, I think this remains to be seen as to how it's going to be structured. Now, I've given you a broad brushstroke idea of what I think it should be, but committee members and staff could take a look at the frequency and the ability of how often it's going to happen and come up with a structure. So I don't have any real ideas to how that would work other than a continual relationship, whether it's sporadic or ongoing, somebody that would be able to work with us and know the background of what they're dealing with. And there's really no disadvantage to that, whether they meet with us once a year or once a month. But at least we would have somebody that we can pick up the phone and start the process.
We also have a number of commercial spaces that we will be leasing both in this existing terminal and the new Illinois terminal, and I think we, you know, I mean, that wouldn't be major business for somebody, but that's an area we could certainly use somebody to give us some input on, you know, what trends in the market are for office and retail and such. So I do think, you know, if I could get a client that every year or two would, you know, have a project, that would be a very worthwhile client to have on our scale, and I think other brokers would feel the same. That would be fantastic.
Excuse me.
All right. Go ahead, Margaret. Go ahead.
I've been on the board for 12 years. And in those 12 years, as I recall, I could easily be wrong, I believe we have purchased 3 properties. I'm sort of backing up what Tomas was saying, you know, is it worth a realtor's, you know, is it worth their while to have our business?
No doubt. I'm absolutely confident you would have people interested. As Phil said, we meet once a month, commercial realtors. We do it at Economic Development Corporation. And to a person that, you know, that round table is full with about 20 people, you would have interested parties.
All right. Any further questions or comments before we allow Carl to have a moment? Go ahead, Dick.
If you didn't have anybody interested, we just don't do it. And also I'd like to say that I think the downside is very small. Very little downside to this. It seems to me that realistically, this would be a good thing to do. It's very logical to have expertise at our fingertips in many areas, and this just being one of them.
All right. I don't see anybody else's microphones lighting up. Carl, I've got a couple questions for you. From a transit agency standpoint, have you been able to glean any information from any transit agencies? It's excellent timing for the train. We'll give it a moment for the engine to clear. But have you gleaned any information from any transit agencies that utilize professional assistance with real estate?
Yeah, I did throw out, actually both Amy Snyder and I threw out to our contacts within APTA, the American Public Transportation Association, generally with agencies our size, because if you get into larger agencies like the University of Illinois, they have their own, they have a whole real estate department, so they have their own staff that are real estate experts, and you know, DART in Dallas, Texas, they do too. You know, so really large agencies, it's just a different kind of animal. We didn't get responses from everybody. I mean, that went out to probably 100 people ish, and I got 15 responses, and 3 of those agencies utilize a real estate agent, and 12 of the agencies do not use a real estate agent. They use their corporate counsel and then their own staff to do the things that we're talking about. One of the CEOs that said they do use a real estate agent said that they don't really get any use out of them. That's more of a problem than not. Didn't give me any details, but just didn't seem very positive about it. So yeah, that's kind of the feedback.
Okay, then property acquisition by MTD in the past 10 to 15 years, did you pull anything together on that?
Yeah, we went back over the history of the district, actually. So over the last 52 years, we've had 8 property acquisitions that we've done over that 8-year period of time. and some of those are clustered around one another. Like we bought the Hadley properties here. That was 5 properties, and I'm counting that as one purchase because it was from one seller, and she only sold them as a group. But we did that, and then we bought the what used to be a tattoo parlor, which was right next to those 5 properties. So that's 2 procurements, and I counted that as 2, but it was really just part of the same deal, purchasing the land for the parking lot that we have on the east side. So, yeah, 8 procurements or acquisitions over the last 8 years.
Those 2 are the most recent things that we've done, basically. Is that right?
1207 is the most recent, which we use for our CDL training facility.
Okay.
Then those procurements, those acquisitions of the Hadley properties and the tattoo shop were prior to that in 2016.
All right. What about other governmental agencies here locally? Have we talked to anybody else about how they're handling the cities, county? Do we have any information on them at all?
I didn't actively survey any of them. Alan mentioned that he talked to the planning department with the city, and then I think they indicated that they, occasionally use agents similar to we have in the past. It's funny, Alan, you mentioned Marty Smith. I've known Marty for 20 or more years, and we've used Marty for some activity also. We've used Jill Guth. Again, I've known Jill for a long time. So when we feel like there's a need, we have used them. I know probably some of you know Art Thoma. We've used him. Coldwell Banker had the other half of our 1101 building listed for excuse me, a period of time. I warned you that I was going to cough. And so I did take my medicine, Phil. Thank you. I see you pulling out the reminder. Appreciate you having my back. So we have used agents, real estate agents, when we've thought it was necessary and found it helpful. On a one-by-one basis, I actually, when we bought the Hadley properties, Jill Guth and Marty were both kind of consultants. We didn't have an official contractual arrangement with either of them for that procurement, but because we're friends, they came in and walked the properties with me and gave me their input on that. And so, that's the value of partnerships and long-term relationships, and so we've gotten the value from that when it was valuable to us. Sorry, that was not, a lot of that wasn't direct to other local governmental agencies, but.
That's fine. Anything else you want to comment on at this time?
The only other thing I thought of, now I'm not remembering whether it was Phil or Alan who said it. I get you two confused all the time. But one of you said, I think Alan, you said that it's useful to have a real estate agent to help identify properties to buy. I think that's totally true. And if we were casting about looking for a property, I think using a real estate agent would be absolutely appropriate. Generally speaking, the projects that we embark on are really geographically targeted and specific. And so, for instance, the Yards project, a real estate agent can't identify properties for us because we're here already, and there are properties that are adjacent to us, and those are the properties that we're talking about. I don't know what the value of having a real estate agent involved. One of you said have them at the table now with us. The city owns the property that we're talking about buying. We're both public agencies. There's a prescribed methodology for trading properties in a project, and we have already had conversations with the city about that process, and we both have our hands tied and will do what the law allows us and requires us to do. And so a real estate agent has nothing that they can add to that process for those city properties. The private property, we're not involved with. And so a real estate agent, I mean, we're not involved with it, so I'm not, there's nothing that a real estate agent would be additive to on that front.
I think we're more discussing, so there was a situation where we were going to build the shell of a building, and then we were going to have a private partner that was going to partner with the district in order to build out something in there, and there was going to be a long-term sort of, not a ground lease, but a lease of the structure to the private partner who was going to operate the upper floors. And that's the kind of situation where
that's not exactly, that's not actually what's happening. That's, I mean, you're close, but that's not actually what we're doing. There is a separate parcel of land that the private developers have under contract, and they are building the residential tower on that. And that residential tower, which they will own, and they will own the property, MTD won't own that, but that building will be connected to the building that we are building on our property and on the property that we acquire from the city, and the parking, and so that's the parking deck, and the ramp will be utilizing the property that the private owner owns. And so there is a relationship there, there is a partnership there. We don't own that, we won't own that, and we're not leasing anything to them. They will own their own portion of the building.
And you don't think you would maybe want some expertise in negotiating that partnership agreement with them?
We do have that. We have our attorney, who in this case is not the one sitting here today. We have Guy Hall and Robin Schwartz representing us in that.
Right, but I mean, as far as having a broker who's familiar with the negotiation aspect rather than just an attorney. I mean, attorneys draw up contracts and things, but somebody who's, you know, got an idea of how to, again, develop the revenue side and things like that. Yeah, to determine the value of our contribution and sort of how we should be remunerated.
Yeah, so I mean, again, sure, we can have somebody there, but we have the prescription from the Federal Transit Administration to how we obtain the value of the money that we put in, and that's fairly prescribed. And so Guy, our attorney, and his firm, he knows what those parameters are, and that's what we're doing.
All right. Anything else that you want to add at this time?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. I don't want to take hours and hours talking about this. I think everybody's been able to share their opinion, and it's my belief that we have a majority of the board that's in favor of at least moving forward and discussing this in a greater depth. So I'm going to direct staff to work with the administrative committee to produce some sort of a structure or come up with a strategy that might be effective and potentially develop an RFQ to seek out a realtor to see if there's anyone that might potentially be interested. And we'll follow up on that with further board direction at that time. Go ahead, Al.
One more question of Carl, and this is a looking forward thing. I know you look backwards as to how many transactions we've had over a period of time. Could you give us, in your mind's eye, what the future brings in terms of the Urbana intermodal transportation acquisitions that are coming about? You know, what are your plans for additional acquisitions? So again, the committee, or what Brad is putting together, can take a look at it with that in mind.
Yeah. Yes, but actually that made me think of something that Phil said, if I can respond to that real quickly in the vein of, do I have anything else to say? It just occurred to me. Phil mentioned a piece of property that that we're currently looking at that has been listed. There was no getting in front of that because we had to go through, and with every property acquisition, we have to go through the NEPA process, and so we had to go through the multi-month, whatever, I don't remember exactly, 8-9 months that it took to go through the NEPA process for that property. There was no getting ahead of that. We are restricted from having any negotiations or conversation about purchase or price prior to NEPA being completed. That is the law. And so there was no getting in front of that. Once NEPA was completed, we started talking to that owner. We are in the midst of that conversation now. And ironically, I don't know what value this has, but just to throw it out there, Jill Guth, who is one of the individuals that we've been talking about, who I have a good relationship, I think you have good relationships with, she's representing that seller. That's part of the nature of the real estate market. People look for work, and if we're selling or buying properties once every 10 years, I would recommend to Jill that she work with those sellers, not with us, because she's going to get a whole lot more business from them than she's going to get with us. But that's neither here nor there. Specific to.
Fuad, though, has been talking about wanting to sell that for 4 or 5 years before he sold it to the guys who currently own it.
Yeah, but we weren't looking at it then. That wasn't even on our radar 4 or 5 years ago.
Case in point.
Maybe I don't understand how that's a case in point. I don't know how a real estate agent would put that on our radar when we didn't even have a project. But to answer your question, Alan, about Urbana, that will, I believe, be a very similar situation to what we're talking about with the yards. There's a parcel that is owned by the city, and we are in conversations with the city of Urbana, in this case, about that property. And so it'll be identical to Champaign. We have 2 public agencies who have the same constrictions on how to transfer property in a project like that, and that's the process that we'll follow, because that's what the law states.
I guess one thing I would throw out there with that, you look at the building we sit in, and it's a wonderful mix of uses. So we've got this event center on the top floor. We have some office space downstairs that's rented by a school. We have a small restaurant, and then we have sort of our transit functions as well. And I think one area where an experienced commercial broker could really be of use is very early in the planning stage, as we're negotiating with the city and figuring out what our plans are, looking at potential ideas. Okay, so if we build this thing, what sort of mix do we want? Do we want 30,000 square foot of office? Do we want 13,000 square foot of office? How much, additional space should we try to work into this with the city or maybe with other adjoining landowners? And how can we put something together that's really going to get the district the most bang for its buck? And some of that is finding, a partner to work through the whole development process with and figure out, hey, what's going to really make this thing pop and what's going to be in demand? Because we don't want to be in a situation where we're, planning to build offices and then we have to sort of pivot and say, well, no, instead we're going to work with somebody to build apartments, So it does help to have, I think, somebody who's got more of a finger on the pulse of the market, maybe.
I think that's the important thing.
All right, Carl and the administrative committee, you have direction. All right, we're moving on to our next item, which will be the yards update from Carl. Al, you want to, thank you.
Okay, I will be transparent up front and tell you that I'm going to be a little circumspect in this update. Alan, you asked for an update, but we are still in the midst of conversations with other governmental entities and private individuals, and some of that we're just not at a place where we can talk about in a public meeting yet. So I'm going to do a little bit of skirting and dancing working to try to get as much information out to you as you desire, but also respecting the privacy of the situation and the conversations that we're currently having. As you know, post-pandemic and the current kind of just national employee shortages that everybody is experiencing. I don't know where all the employees went, but every restaurant, every company, every transit district, we're all struggling hiring people. You hear about supply chain issues, and you are experiencing inflation every day of your life. Well, guess what? The Yards is experiencing all of those too, and the results of those. And so construction cost estimates have ballooned approximately 25% after the pre-pandemic estimates that we had when we were all set to go and we had all the partnerships lined up, and we literally were primed and ready to go, and then the pandemic hit, and here we are almost 3 years later now, and we have millions of dollars of additional expenses. And so as well as the rest of the community, that as a result of those increased expenses, the Division of Intercollegiate Athletics for the University of Illinois, they have decided we can't do it, we're out. They were all ready to give a green light. They hadn't officially done it yet, but we were at the finish line. But now they just couldn't make up the difference of the increased expenses, and so they said that they weren't in. We had a speaker earlier make a mention that the MTD proposed a hockey rink. MTD has never proposed a hockey rink. We never were going to build a hockey rink. That was just an associated part of the overall project, and we had separate partners who were doing that, and not a dollar of MTD money was ever going to go into that, just for the public for continuity's sake, I guess. Irrespective of that, that's not a go anymore. The university has said they're out. So that has dramatically changed what we are programming. And when I say we, it's this larger project team with all the development partners and the City of Champaign, MTD. Phase 2, which is south of Logan, was on hold completely after the university stepped aside. There's some conversation about maybe doing something a little different south of Logan and bringing a phase 2 back in. And so I'm encouraged by some of the conversations that other folks have had. To reiterate, MTD is not directly related to anything occurring south of Logan. It's a tangential project to ours, which we were calling phase 1. I guess I should drop the phase 1, phase 2 monikers, because they're not phase 1 and phase 2 of the same project. If they both occur, they will be two separate projects that are tangential to one another. There is conversation about that, but north of Logan, our project, we are continuing to discuss, but we have these additional expenses that we're trying to figure out. And so, Phil, you mentioned the return rate for rentals and that kind of thing. I mean, that complete picture changed for the private developers with, they thought they had it figured out, and then you layer in an additional $10 million, and suddenly it's a totally different financial picture than what it was before. And so the developers were very upfront and honest and said, we've got to review this whole thing, and it things were dicey for a while as to whether or not we would continue to move forward. But they have been very committed and passionate and dedicated to the project and want to see it happen. And so they didn't just walk away. They worked with us, and they did a lot of creative work to obtain different methods of bringing additional funds to the table, and we'll probably have some scope changes in the whole project. You know, we'll probably have to dial some elements down to constrain expenses, and so that combined with some additional development partners that we, the more global we of the project team are talking to, I think we're getting closer to having the financial picture solved. I'll be totally honest with you and tell you it's not solved as we sit here today, though. There are still some questions that we are trying to get answered. We have some problems that we're trying to work out creative solutions for. But we are actively talking about that. Just on Monday of this week, we met with the City of Champaign and the larger development team, the developers that we've been working with for the last 6, 8 years, whatever it's been, and the new ones. And we had a very productive meeting with the city. And so that was a significant step forward to reignite that conversation and talk about how we're going to manage the way the tax increment financing district, the TIF district, will play into it, and the private funding and the MTD funding and all of that. So, you know, we didn't even get to the point where I have details that I can share with you yet, but those conversations are ongoing. And then I guess just the final thing I would say as an update, the one thing that actually is actively underway is the downtown sewer extension or expansion. I'm not sure exactly the appropriate word, but kind of down around Springfield. In order to do this project, we need to expand the sewer capacity. And so the City of Champaign received some state funding, and they have some other funding that they're using to complete that project. That's about a $7.7 million project, and the engineering contract has been awarded to Clark Dietz. They are in the process of designing that work, and they think that they'll be going out to bid in February or March of 2023, and then the work should be completed by the fall of 2024. So that's great news, because our project would never take place, the South of Logan project would never take place if we don't expand the sewer capacity for those projects. So that's underway, that's happening. It's not just for our project. Downtown Champaign needs that increased capacity for all of the development that's occurring, but it's happening, so that's good. That's maybe step one in the whole thing.
MTD has no part in that.
In the sewer project? No, we're not directly involved with it in any way.
Could I ask a question? Is there a time when you say, this isn't going to go, the now smaller yards project?
I think in theory there could be a time where we say, okay, this just isn't going to happen. Let's pick up our toys and go home. I don't think we're anywhere near that. But yeah, in theory that could happen. I don't have a point in time in mind as we sit here today that I would identify as being a drop dead date for the project.
No, I didn't mean that.
The MTD has needs to expand Illinois Terminal, and the expansion is the only way to solve the needs that we have. And so, I mean, I think this form of the project, maybe a date and time could occur that we say it's not going to happen, but some form of the project probably has to happen to solve those problems.
Does this project you're talking about now have to do with buildings here on the parking lot? That didn't seem to have anything to do with the functioning of the service delivery by buses here.
I'm sorry, I don't know.
At one time, there was a series of buildings proposed across the west edge of the parking lot. This parking lot, right outside, right?
Maybe you mean the south edge?
I mean, Bruce, we had, this may be what you're about or thinking about, we did a study back in, probably 2013 about the expansion of Illinois Terminal. We hired Ratio Architecture to do a study on expanding it, and they did some preliminary designs of how that expansion could work or what it might look like. This was even before we started talking to Core Spaces about the actual project that we were talking about today. So it was a really early, just kind of a what if type of drawing, and maybe that's what you're thinking about. Yeah, that's right. This doesn't have anything like. No, not really. I mean, we've deviated from that pretty significantly. Thank you. Yeah.
Phil.
Is there I guess two questions. The first would be, is there a date? I remember we got a congressional, maybe an earmark of some sort for roughly, if I recollect, under $20 million. Is there a date that we need to move forward to preserve that money, or is that something we've got sort of an indefinite timeline to work with?
It's not indefinite, but the first time, first let me say, it wasn't an earmark, it was a grant award through a program called the Bus and Bus Facilities Program that the Federal Transit Administration has, and it was 17.2 million-ish, maybe 2.5, something like that. And there are some time points on the life of that grant. The first one is obligating the award, and that has been done. So we've met that obligation, and we didn't need to do it until I'm gonna hesitate to actually identify a year, because I'm probably not going to be right. But several years away from today was that first time point. But we've already met the needs. We've already done that. We've submitted that grant to the FTA. So that first milestone is met. There is another one after that. I don't know what it is, and it might be 10 years, it could be 8 years, I don't know. It's many, many years down the road.
Fantastic. And I guess my other question was, when you talk about we're negotiating with Core Spaces, is Hans Grote-Lucian our primary person we're still working with there, or are there other people we're working with instead now?
We meet regularly with this meeting that we just had on Monday, Brian Neiswinder and
So Neiswinder and Hans were both involved.
Yep.
All right, very good.
Al, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, that was my question too, as far as obligation of spending the 17 when we had to get that accomplished. At what point are there any contractual changes that are going to occur on the basis of what you've just told us?
Almost assuredly, yes. Actually, the current development agreement that we have with, we say CCH, it's the LLC that is Core Champaign Hockey, which is a bit of a misnomer name for the LLC now because the project has changed. But that development agreement almost assuredly will be altered as a result of bringing in some additional partners.
In the case that we've had this as an open session, I would prefer, since we can have closed meetings on contractual arrangements, I would prefer to have continual discussion on this as it occurs rather than after it's over. In other words, if some of the things that we're proposing to have our attorney there sitting with you at these meetings, or a realtor, I personally have a fiduciary responsibility as a board member that I don't take lightly. I don't want to be involved in something that I get questioned on in the outside that I have no knowledge of, and the public does. And it could actually happen that occurred in that manner. So if we are doing contractual changes, we can meet in closed session if we're changing contracts. I mean, if we're doing something like that. Am I correct?
The short answer is yes.
There is a longer answer, though, but that is an exception to the Open Meeting Act that as the board contemplates the negotiation of an agreement that we can meet in closed session.
My experience with county board was we had ongoing meetings as the contract was proceeding. And it helped me understand the negotiations and contribute. There were many times when board members would contribute based on their thoughts. So again, I don't want you out there on an island, Carl, and that's what I guess this whole conversation is about, that it puts you out on an island that I'm not comfortable with, and I'm not comfortable not knowing what's happening in the contractual arrangements when there is progress. I'm not saying we go there and nothing happened and we have a closed session on it. I'm saying when something occurs that requires a response from us, board members should know about it.
I agree with you, Al, and I think even, it's not necessarily an Open Meetings Act for you to, at least update the Facilities Committee or something as this is going on at the very least, just so we've got some idea. I mean, I've got a couple meetings a month, but I'd certainly be willing to spend more time on something that's this important.
Yeah, it's a committee on the whole, so we can't do that, but we can meet with the chair and the vice chair of the Facilities Committee, and that is not a violation of the Open Meetings Act. I think that's what you mean, the chair and the vice chair. Yeah.
Additional questions on Carl's report for the arts right now? So this kind of got touched on, but I'm going to dig just a tiny bit deeper. So we don't really have a pending federal timeline on the funding that we're concerned about.
I mean, technically there is a timeline.
There is a timeline, but we don't have anything that's a problem right now.
Correct.
For the MTDs, for our specific part of this project, what's our restriction from starting to work on this project? How are we restricted?
I guess I would say that we're only restricted by the complication or the complexity of the project. For instance, we've designed the building, and it hasn't been architecturally designed yet, but just conceptually from the project team, we've designed the building, the structure, as the expansion of Illinois Terminal, the parking deck, and the residential tower, and of course the ramp into the parking deck as one structure. And so for us to enter into an agreement with the A&E firm to just start talking about our part, that's just part of a building, part of a structure, and it's pretty hard to design part of the building without designing the building. And so, we really need to have everybody at the table paying for the A&E work to design the whole structure so that we have a holistic design.
So I guess my point is, if this fades away at some point, we're going to have to come up with a plan of our own based on our own needs, and we're not going to, we can't do both, basically, I guess is what I'm saying. Right now, we can't plan for a standalone building because we're still planning on having a complementary structure to everything else that's going to happen. So we basically are kind of stuck in neutral right now until we either have a development agreement or we don't, basically. Is that what you're saying?
That's somewhat what I would say. I know it feels like to you, and I probably should apologize for placing you in a position where you feel this way, that you feel like you're stuck in neutral. We work on this regularly, we being staff, and so we're literally not in neutral. I mean, we are moving forward. It's really slow, and I will grant you that, but it's not neutral, and we do work on it regularly, and so I think that we need to do updates more frequently with committee chairs and vice chairs, closed session when it's appropriate for this group. So we'll endeavor to do that. But to answer your question, yes, while this is still an active project, it doesn't seem fruitful.
The potential for us to go alone is just going to be idling until it's a no or no go, basically.
Yeah.
And obviously, the city's doing work for this potential, whether the sewer work is just for downtown or it's also to enhance and make this project here work. That's ongoing. So we're not like nothing's happening. I understand what you're saying. There are things that are going on, but we've been kind of sitting here treading water for a while, it kind of feels like. So, all right. Anything else on this item?
Is Go to Lotion out of the project?
No, Hans was at the meeting on Monday. He's still involved with the project.
To continue his part over here.
Say again, sorry?
He had his part started at Logan and went further, right?
Well, when you say his part, I mean, he was a member of the development team, the private development team. And so the portion of the project south of Logan was the private development team working with the university. The part of the project that was north of Logan was the private development team working with MTD, and then the city of Champaign was working with both ends of that project. Does that respond?
So there's still a portion of the yards project as you envision it now that's got Go to Lotion involved.
He is still involved, yes.
Okay. So that's beyond any of the facilities that we need to expand the service here of buses, right? He has nothing to do with that. I'm just trying to understand what this new yards version is.
The north of Logan part of the project still has an expansion of this building, expanding this facility, and all the bus platforms and waiting areas and all of that. That's part of it.
Right.
Then it's got a parking structure that is built into that building, and of course a ramp into that parking structure that is penetrating the residential tower on the private property, the private part of the development, and so that's all interconnected. So it's residential, it's parking, it's Illinois terminal expansion, and it's our bus platform expansion. And that is all one structure, and MTD and the development team are all involved with that.
All right. I see no further hands waving, so we're going to declare this yards update to be over. We're going to move into our action items. Our first item will be Ordinance 22-5, and that is the General Tax Levy Ordinance for revenue year 2022. We had a public hearing on that earlier in our meeting, and at this time I'll ask for a motion and a second to move forward with the tax levy.
I move that we adopt Ordinance 2022-5 for the general tax levy.
I second it.
It's been moved and seconded to approve Ordinance 2022-5, the General Tax Levy Ordinance for revenue year 2022. Any board comment or question? Seeing none, I'll ask for a roll call.
Barnes,
Yes.
Chaplin,
Yes.
Delgado,
Yes.
Fasella,
Nay.
Yes.
Hannan, Nudo, Dial.
Yes, that motion carries. Next item for the board is the ratification of the approval action for the 2022-2023 Urbana School District 116 Transportation Agreement. That was apparently approved at the October 22nd, 2022 school board meeting.
Yeah,
Carl.
this is
Oh, sorry. I recall what this is. Go ahead.
Yeah. So we voted on this at the last meeting, and we all had, I don't know, we all blacked out or something, but we never asked for a motion and a second on the approval of the contract with the Urbana School District. You voted on it, and you've voted unanimously to approve it, but we never asked for a motion. So the council has asked us to ratify that vote by properly asking for a motion and a second.
So at this time, I'll ask for a motion and a second to ratify the approval action.
Second.
Seconded again, just in case.
It's been moved and seconded to ratify the previously taken action for the Urbana School Board. That'll be a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Next item is purchase of 4 60-foot diesel electric hybrid buses. Carl.
Ashley is on her
going to
way.
cover this. Ashley, please proceed.
Thanks. So.
You're going to want to pull that down. There you go.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. So this is for the approval of bus procurement purchase order. The district needs to replace 4 14-year-old 60-foot articulated hybrid buses. They're $1,269,258 each, for a total of $5,077,032 for 4 buses. They would be paid for with 80% federal 5307 funding, 20% local funding, and they'll be purchased off the district's 5-year bus procurement contract with a new flyer. That's something that the board approved in January 2021, and we've done several purchases off that contract already. The unique situation here is that the only supplier of the 60-foot hybrid certified engine is discontinuing that engine in 2024. So this actually presents the district's last chance to replace our those 4 buses. Those are our oldest buses in the 60-foot buses in the fleet. So if we can replace them now, we won't have to do another replacement for several years. And so we won't have to worry about this issue of the engine being discontinued. If approved, they would begin production in September 2023. So the recommended action is to authorize the managing director to issue a purchase order to New Flyer in the amount of $5,077,032 for 4 60-foot diesel electric hybrid buses.
Questions from the board on this item? Go ahead.
Will there potentially be a problem getting parts for these buses since we're getting in on the tail end of production?
That is a good question. There's always that risk, and that's been kind of a common issue lately. There have been some delays, but they seem to be more optimistic about the timelines these days. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Carl. I think the only major issue with this particular one is the engine itself, which, you know, we've been assured will be produced through 2023. So I think that we're relatively guaranteed on that, but.
Yeah, it's a great question and a solid answer. The only thing I would add to it is the rest of the bus is the same as all the other buses, so there's not a problem. Relative to the specific engine, and I'm going to say, Josh can correct me if I'm wrong, Josh Beerbaum, the maintenance director, but the engine will be under warranty, and the manufacturer is not going out of business. I mean, it's Cummins, they're the diesel engine manufacturer. They're going to support us, and if push came to shove and we had to rebuild an engine, the folks in our maintenance department could do it. We used to rebuild our own engines. We don't anymore, but we did, and our guys, our folks could do it. They're that good. So worst case scenario, we're going to be able to get the engines fixed. I don't think it would ever come to that, though. Cummins is going to support that engine. They're just not going to manufacture new versions of that engine that will be EPA,
certified.
EPA certified, yes.
I missed the point here. We could buy just new engines for these 4 buses?
No.
No, these are bus replacements.
But you were talking about the rest of the bus is okay.
What I meant was, of these new buses, the rest of the bus is just like any other bus. It's just this engine that will stop being manufactured after 2023.
I misunderstood.
And I guess I could clarify this for anybody watching, because Carl had a really good discussion about this before the meeting just with me. But so they're still going to be manufacturing a 60-foot bus, but the only options that might be available to us if we wanted to buy after next year would be to just buy it straight diesel with no hybrid component, which we don't want to do, or to go straight electric, which would introduce a whole bunch of logistical issues with charging and timing and stuff like that. So I'm really happy that you got in front of this and figured out, hey, this is our last year to order these. And you said we've got 12 or 13 years, theoretically, before we'll need another 60-foot bus if we do this. So that buys us a lot of time to get hydrogen or cold fusion or who knows what our next deal is going to be.
Cold fusion.
There you go.
That I'd like to see. That'd be awesome. But just to, yeah, we once these 4 buses are replaced, they're 2009. Then the next oldest bus, articulated buses that we'll have are 2020 buses, and so they won't even be eligible for replacement until 2032. And we generally don't replace 60-foot buses at the end of their useful lifespan. We run them for several years after that. So we could have up to 15 years from today before we are confronted with what to do with 60-foot replacements again.
And I think, don't manufacturers generally have an obligation to provide enough parts, they're supposed to be available for 10 years beyond when the manufacturing ends, they're supposed to have parts available to fill out for 10 years. So, yeah, it's an important thing in this industry for sure.
Yeah, just a fun story. You probably won't think it's fun, but we actually have 4 hybrid articulated 60-foot buses on being produced right now, not this contract that we're asking for approval for, but currently online. They're replacing the last 4 2001 buses. So do the math real quick. Those are well over 12 years old. Those buses we're starting to have problems getting parts for, and we can't get Freon that works in those buses. They don't manufacture that kind of Freon anymore. So when they're 20, 21, 22 years old, that's a problem, and we probably let them go too long. But our maintenance department does such a great job keeping them running that we've always kind of like, I mean, we should keep running them because they're expensive, and we should squeeze every last bit of utility out of them.
Just as a byproduct of the sale, what are you doing with the old 4? I noticed in the request on the 10 40-foots, it's 12 years or 500,000 miles is the useful life. What do these have, and can you sell them to anybody, or what do you do with them?
Generally, what we do, we've been doing one of 2 things of late. We either donate them to the Fire Service Institute, and they tear them apart and blow them up and burn them and do training on them, and they have fun with them. So we do that. They probably wouldn't want 4 of them, but we might give them 1. And then the other ones we just generally put on a governmental public auction site, and so different people buy them. Other transit agencies could. We've sort of developed a relationship with a pastor in Michigan who buys a lot of our buses, and he comes down, picks them up, trailers them up to Michigan, and then he tears them apart and scraps them and uses that as a fundraiser for his ministries. Okay, so but anybody could buy them off of the auction site.
Good use. Good. Thank you.
All right. Additional board comment on this item. Seeing and hearing none, we'll ask for a motion and a second.
So we need a motion to...
Yes.
So moved.
I'll do it. So moved.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the purchase of 4 60-foot diesel electric hybrid buses. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. Our next item is the cooperative purchasing agreement with the Washington State Department of Enterprise Services. Ashley.
Okay, so unlike with hybrid buses, we don't currently have a purchasing contract in place for hydrogen buses, which is why this memo includes 2 action items, one to enter into the cooperative purchasing agreement and one to issue a bus procurement purchase order. So for the first action, the Washington State Department of Enterprise Services developed a cooperative purchasing contract. They vetted all the contractors and established in compliance with all the federal requirements in order to provide buses and related equipment to multiple participants, including transit agencies across the country. So entering into this agreement, which is included in Exhibit A, would allow us to purchase 10 hydrogen fuel cell buses from New Flyer in 2023. So regarding the second action, the need to purchase these buses, there is a need to replace 10 40-foot diesel electric hybrid buses that were purchased in 2011. They've reached the end of their useful life, or they will in 2023. The idea is to replace these hybrid buses with hydrogen buses in line with the FY23 budget, as well as the Zero Emission Transition Plan and MTD's Climate Action Plan. Each of these buses is $1,295,908 each. So for 10 buses, it'll be $12,959,080. The funding will be provided with a combination of federal community project funding, known as CPF or earmarks for short, federal Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, which I'm going to refer to as CRISA. That's another federal funding source, and then also some local funds. So you might have heard that in October, Senator Durbin announced $3,785,080 in earmarks was allocated to MTD to support the purchase of hybrid electric buses and or hydrogen fuel cell buses or related infrastructure. So we propose using that entire allocation toward this bus purchase. The remaining funding then will come from the federal CRISA funds and local funds. So the 2 actions, staff recommend authorizing the managing director to enter into a cooperative purchasing agreement with the Washington State Department of Enterprise Services, and second, to authorize the managing director to issue a purchase order to New Flyer in the amount of $12,959,080 for 10 40-foot hydrogen fuel cell electric buses.
Okay, questions on the first part of that on the cooperative purchasing agreement with Washington State Enterprise? Questions?
Yes. Do they make a 60-foot hydrogen bus articulated? They do.
That's not what we're talking about.
I know it's not.
Okay.
And do we know what the cost of a 40-foot diesel hybrid is, new?
So I don't have a quote right now, because whenever we make a purchase, they give us a quote kind of immediately before they start production as prices change for all of the parts, et cetera. So I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. There might be kind of a standard difference, but I can say we do currently have 2 60-foot articulated hydrogen fuel cell buses in the fleet, and we'll be adding 10 more to fill out our kind of current capacity for supporting hydrogen vehicles with the fueling station.
I understand that. I'm just trying to get a cost comparison to
Sure.
on the roads moving seats.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have that at this time.
Hydrogen buses at 40 feet.
Bruce, can you use your microphone?
Sorry. I keep turning it on and off. These hydrogen buses are costing us as much as a 60-foot articulated diesel.
That is roughly true. They're actually a little more than what just a standard standard diesel would cost. The hydrogen technology is quite a bit more expensive than diesel technology.
Yeah. The second question is, well, would you please supply me with the cost of a new 40-foot diesel hybrid? Do we have the hydrogen production capacity for these 10 new buses?
Here, I'm getting from my phone a friend. Ashley's partner, Jane, is messaging us, and I've got my phone in front of me, and Ashley doesn't. So thank you, Jane. She's online watching. So I think this is the answer that you're looking for, Bruce. Because we also have 4 40-foot hybrid buses online right now. The price that we paid for those 4 buses per unit that we ordered last year, so that's the most recent that we have, is $683,000. That's for a 40-foot bus.
Yeah. That's quite a bit of difference. It's almost twice for hydrogen. And do we have the capacity, hydrogen capacity,
Yes.
in place?
Yes.
I don't remember where we were at. Do we have a motion and a second?
Yes.
All right,
To join the agreement.
to join the agreement for the cooperative purchasing agreement.
Sorry, just to be a pain about this, we do or we do not?
We need a motion and a
Okay.
second.
We do not have.
So we have a
need
motion and a second to approve the cooperative purchasing agreement.
I move we approve adding ourselves to the cooperative purchasing agreement.
It's been moved and seconded to join the Washington State Department of Enterprise Services in a cooperative purchasing agreement. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carried. Our next item is the purchase of 10 40-foot hybrid fuel cell electric buses through the Washington State Department of Enterprise Services purchasing agreement. Any board questions? Has been thoroughly explained by staff.
Mr. Chair, just real quick, you said hybrid, it's referring to hydrogen cells.
Sorry, hydrogen.
There's lots of types of buses
There's
being
lots,
thrown
there's
around
lots
right now.
of, there's lots of text in front of me too. 10 40-foot hydrogen fuel cell electric buses. Any questions from the board? If not, I'll ask for a motion in a second.
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the purchase of 10 40-foot hydrogen fuel cell electric buses through an agreement with the Washington State Department of Enterprise Services. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. Our next item is a hydrogen fuel cell project technical assistance contract with Center for Transportation and Environment. Ashley.
Okay, so the Center for Transportation and the Environment, or CTE, is a nonprofit whose mission is to improve the efficiency and sustainability of energy and transportation systems. MTD has worked with CTE since 2017 in the implementation of the initial phase of the hydrogen project. So with the purchase of 10 additional hydrogen buses, and them being new buses, these will be 40-foot buses to add to the 2 60-foot buses we already have. And with new hydrogen fuel cell technology, we would like to continue our support from CTE, specifically for data reporting, bus procurement and build, and station management. This contract would be through June 2024, and the total amount would be $204,500. A detailed statement of work is included in the packet in attachment 1. To pay for it, the district would utilize 29% state funding and 71% local funding to cover the cost. So the recommended action would be to authorize the managing director to enter into a contract with the Center for Transportation and the Environment in an amount not to exceed $204,500.
Questions from the board on this item?
This is in the budget, 23 budget.
I don't think this is.
This is not specifically in the budget.
Just general?
Yeah. The funds are available, but yeah, it wasn't a line item in the budget. It wasn't delineated in the budget.
Bill?
I would be, maybe just out of curiosity with the hydrogen thing, which I'm kind of excited about, I'd be really interested in seeing the monthly reports on our hydrogen fleet report performance, if that wouldn't be too much trouble.
Yeah, that's part of what this agreement is getting all that reporting in a digestible format, because there's a ton of data, and it comes from about, I don't know, it feels like 52 different sources, and trying to put it all together. That's part of this contract, is making that usable for us, and we'll be happy to share it at that point.
Awesome.
Additional questions on this item from the board? Seeing and hearing none, I'll ask for a motion and a second to approve the hydrogen fuel cell project technical assistance contract. Bruce
moved it. I'm going to second it.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the technical assistance contract with CTE. All in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. Next item, and our final action item, is the training simulator contract.
Okay, lastly, the district currently has 2 training simulators that were purchased in 2010. Oh, thanks, Brendan. These are used during training for new bus operators and also retraining existing operators. These are important safety tools for the district. They allow for full simulation of driving a bus, including all of the controls, gauges, and other systems that are involved in managing and operating a vehicle. But it allows them to experience that without removing any actual buses from service or burning any fuel. It also provides extra safety training in really specifically designed scenarios that can emulate our uniquely challenging campus and downtown environments. So part of this contract involves the software developers to create specific environments that are specific to our community, like Illinois Terminal, but it also allows the trainers a toolbox to design specific safety events that could potentially happen in the community, so that the drivers are proactively trained on safety events or avoiding safety events. When the district first got the simulators in 2010, they were mostly used for post-incident training with specific scenarios in that particular case. So obviously we can't simulate a safety event in real life, so this is a great way to do it in a safe way. So the current training simulators are currently 12 years old. They are out of warranty and require frequent technical support. Given the cost of new simulators, staff determined that it wasn't critical to continue to have 2, but 1 new simulator will be a more reliable training tool. It will provide updated technology that will require less support, and it will also provide some new features that allow for detailed feedback for instructors and trainees to learn from their experience in the simulated environment. A request for proposals for a new simulator was released in June. 2 proposals were received. A group of staff evaluated the proposals. A smaller group then attended product demonstrations before making a final recommendation. And more information on that process, the evaluation process, can be found in Exhibit A. This project is in the fiscal year 23 budget. It will be funded 100% with federal funds through the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. So the recommended action is to authorize the managing director to enter into a contract with FAAC Incorporated in the amount of $765,243 for 1 new training simulator. And Brendan Sennett, our Director of Safety and Training, is here to answer any technical questions you might have.
Question here. Does this more advanced, really, training simulator reduce our use or need of the facility we built for actual driver bus when they're moving buses?
No, sir. We're still required to accumulate a certain amount of behind-the-wheel training hours. So
it's still the same?
It's still the same. This will just be a supplemental component to our training program that, as Ashley mentioned, it allows us to recreate safety events that occur in our very challenging service area, so that we can allow people to make mistakes from behind a screen rather than in person.
Additional questions, Margaret?
So this simulator isn't used for CDL training?
No, ma'am. There are certain laws that prevent us from using simulators to replace behind-the-wheel training.
Any other questions from the board on this particular item? Seeing and hearing none, I'll ask for a motion and a second.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the training simulator contract. All in favor?
And
Opposed? That motion carried. That is our final action item for today's meeting. Our next meeting, regularly scheduled meeting, will be, one more thing.
Sorry, I just wanted, real quick, one of the other items that I got from my phone a friend, Jane, relative to your question earlier about the expiration of the federal funds for the yards project. So that was a bus facilities grant that I mentioned. We were awarded that in 2019, and the requirement was that we had to obligate it within 4 years. And so we have done that, and federal FY 2023 would have been the deadline for that, but we already did that, and the amount was $17,275,000. And Jane indicates that there is nothing in the notice of funding opportunity that the funds would expire again in the future. I think what I'm thinking of is that when the FTA does their triennial, their every 3-year audit, they are checking to make sure that funds aren't just sitting, not doing anything, and so they're always kind of beating you up around the head if you're not using the funds. But I don't know what the technical expiration for that is, and maybe there isn't one.
In this case, I think we've got a good excuse.
Yeah, yes, the pandemic, yeah.
All right. With that, our next regularly scheduled Board of Trustees meeting will be Wednesday, January 25th, 2023 at 3 p.m. right here at the Illinois Terminal. This time I'll ask for a motion and second to adjourn.
Seconded. And Bruce did make that motion from
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn, and we are adjourned.